We all know people who have been affected by disease. Could be somebody in our family, could be a friend. But we may not know what the revolutionary treatments and how to think about the healthcare system in its entirety. We probably don't know any of the truth of that. At least I didn't, even though this is related to an industry that I'm very intimately involved with. And that's why I love Travis Kristofferson and what he did in Tripping Over the Truth, the Metabolic Theory of Cancer, which is at aubreymarcus.com/cancer. And then also his new book, Curable, which talks about the medical system at large. I can't wait to share this podcast with you guys. I literally think it's one of the most important podcasts I've ever recorded. So I hope you guys enjoy it, and I hope you share it because it really contains some super important information. Enjoy. Travis Christofferson, you're here in the building.
Be here. Thanks, man.
Great to have you, man. I mean, when I read Tripping Over the Truth, the Metabolic Theory of Cancer, I forget where I first saw it, but I read the book and my jaw was just open for pretty much the whole book. And then I was like, okay, everything's changed. The world's changed. This book exists. Now everybody's going to think about cancer completely differently. And we're on to the new paradigm of treating this disease. And I put it out and I was like, here it goes, ready? And then it went around a little bit, but like people are stubborn with their thoughts. And what should have been a boomerang of an enlightenment and questioning and thoughts and like reevaluating something that's, you know, a major issue in our culture didn't do that in that kind of way that it potentially could. And if you look back through time, of course that makes sense because nothing ever happens that way. But it's just such an important revelation that you put forward, both in that book and then all the other subsequent revelations you put forward in Curable. So I'm just really excited to talk to you about it and at least maybe give that boomerang a little butts more, you know, increase the 50-year lag time that we see on medical treatments actually being adopted. Maybe increase that to, I don't know, 49.8 years or so. I don't know, whatever effect we're going to have. But it's just great to have you here, man, and to be able to talk about these issues.
Yeah, there was a book written on the nature of scientific revolutions. I can't remember what, it's a very common book, but they follow that path. It's this long lag where people debate it, and then you know there's kind of some anger on both sides, and then there's this sort of a kind of acceptance phase, but it's almost a lifetime, and that's that Max Planck quote that before you know new ideas are introduced, you almost have to wait for the old generation, the old guard, to die off first. And I was like you, when I first read Tom Seyfried's book, Cancer is a Metabolic Disease, just shocked by the amount and the quality of data to support this new theory of cancer. And then this reconfigures, you know, how you treat it and how you approach it. And this whole industry that is, you know, healthcare is now the number one industry in the world. So it was shocking to me, to how do not more people know about this? But then you realize the inertia behind the current system.
Yeah. Well, there's the inertia behind the current system because a lot of people listening to this are probably like, well, duh, it's the number one industry in the world. Of course there's going to be resistance because it's all about the money. Well, but then you look at something like how when they figured out the cure for scurvy in the British Royal Navy, it took 50 years for them to get fucking lemons on their boat.
Yeah, right.
You know, people just dying and just getting thrown overboard as shark food, you know, from fucking scurvy. And then they're like, well, okay, 50 years, I guess we'll follow this cure that's been already shown, right? And then in every different case, even when there's not money involved, when it's actually costing people money, it takes time. And I think that's what you do such a good job in Curable with, is it's not just about the money, because there is a lot about the money, and we'll talk about that and some of the ways that the financial structure of the healthcare system is disadvantageous, from the funding of the studies to the fee for service that the doctors get. There's a lot of issues that do involve money. So it's not about the money, but it's also about the way that the mind thinks. Like, we are stubborn motherfuckers, and we do not like new ideas coming to dethrone the existing ideas.
Yeah, we get stuck in those mental paradigms. Scurvy was a weird case. This guy James Lynn proved it unequivocally on back when the Royal Navy was out for months at a time, and literally hundreds of thousands of people were dying from scurvy.
And that's a lack of vitamin C for anybody who doesn't know what scurvy
take
is,
a
or
lemon.
they've just watched pirate movies and said, "Yeah, fucking scurvy."
Yeah, it was a real thing.
Yeah, it was a real thing. It was like an actual disease. People died.
Yeah, and so yeah, he published this. It was lemon juice. It cured these guys. And God, Mike, you talk about a horrible disease. So you run out of vitamin C. You can't make collagen. And they described it as like lassitude of the knees and a putrefaction of the gums. So you're just basically your connective tissues melting away. And then so he gave them all these, some people thought it was the salt water, they thought malt was a cure, and he gave them lemons. And these two guys that were in this throes of scurvy got up and started helping everybody else. He published it, and then there was a huge lag before they implemented it. Mm-hmm. And, as we were talking about too, the fecal transplant was the same process. They knew about this for C. diff in 1958. This guy published unequivocal data in 4 people that it was basically a cure. And again, we had this lag until about 2015.
So the C. diff thing is crazy because like the cure rate for, and I have it somewhere here in my notes, but I can't exactly find it at the moment, but cure rate, if I recall, is something like 96% with the fecal transplant, which is actually taking somebody else's gut microbiome through their feces. They have ways to actually filter out the shit part now and just keep the probiotics. But you transplant that directly into somebody else's colon, and the colon is where all like C. diff infections take hold, which is a particularly pathogenic and aggressive bacteria that antibiotics only work like sub 40% of the time, or like 30% of the time.
I think it's 75, but then it drops down to 40 and then to 20. So once you get caught in that cycle, you're pretty much fucked. Yeah.
I mean, meanwhile, if you can go butt to butt with a hose, I mean, it's not that easy. You need a blender or you need a doctor, but basically you get some healthy poop in your colon, game over, you're done. You don't have to deplete your entire body's microbiome. You don't have to go do all this stuff. You just need to have someone shit in your butt. That's it. And you're cured.
It was such a, that story, as I dug into it, Incurable, was so remarkable because it goes back to the 1940s and World War II. And the Nazis had just won a campaign in Northern Africa against the British. And all of a sudden they had this horrible outbreak of dysentery. And so the Nazis flew in their chemists, their doctors, everybody. And what they noticed was the local Arabs were fine. They were just somehow weren't affected by this. And so they tracked them and they found out they were getting sick, but they'd walk behind a camel, and when it defecated, they'd scoop it up and eat it. And so the idea was somehow there's some bacteria in this camel dung that's out-competing this dysentery.
But did they have that idea, or did they just think that like eating poo was the magical cure?
No, Louis Pasteur, he had established germ theory at that point, and they knew that was it. So they isolated it and they gave it to the soldiers, and it worked. And it was some, I can't remember, Subtilis bacteria, Subtilis or something.
Bacillus subtilis.
That's it. And that was one of the, that was the kind of the main line for dysentery at the time. And then it was about 2 years later that penicillin came out. So it was really interesting at that moment when you think about if we would have taken a different path instead of the antibiotic path. I mean, they were lifesavers, no doubt about it. But if we could have appreciated what that bacteria was doing versus just wiping it out with antibiotics, medicine would have taken a different course, but it didn't. And so we used antibiotics. Everybody knows the story. You get pathogenic resistance and so forth. And so this has always been a problem. And in the 50s, people they give antibiotics perioperatively, right before surgery, to prevent infection. And a lot of these people would develop C. diff in the aftermath. And so this doctor...
Because the antibiotics are wiping out all of your friendly probiotic bacteria. Like what people may not understand is bacteria are perpetually in competition with the fungus, with everything in your gut, right? So an antibiotic is like a nuclear bomb. It's like Agent Orange. It's coming through to the whole forest, not discriminating which plants it's killing the good ones, killing the bad ones, wiping everything out. And then that gives ground for whatever is still hanging on, whatever's alive, and whatever wants to be the most aggressive at that point in time to just flourish. Right. And sometimes that's C. diff.
Right. Sometimes
it's not. Sometimes it's actually yeast that takes the place of all of these. That's why there's so many yeast infections that come after an antibiotic course. It's like whatever is there, it's just kind of like, oh, wow. new free ground, nothing to compete with me. I'm just going to rush right through, right?
Yeah.
And so
blank canvas.
And that's what's happening. And that's what's creating the fertile ground for C. diff to take hold. That's what was happening when the Bacillus subtilis was actually competing against the pathogenic bacteria that was causing the dysentery, right? It's just introducing that natural level of competition and having something that outcompetes the existing pathogenic bacteria.
Right. And so this doctor in 1958 in Denver had that same epiphany. And back, think of the 58s, all feces was just thought of as a disease vector.
Right.
And this guy had this subtle, epiphany, this moment of intuition that perhaps fecal matter was this ecosystem, like you described, this whole ecosystem, and he called it reestablishing the balance of nature. So he took some feces from a maternity ward nearby, and these patients had C. diff, and just put an enema in, and that was it. It was a cure for 4 patients, and so this was published in the Journal of Surgery in 1958. And it just never caught on, and for obvious reasons, I think that it's much easier to give a pill than fecal transplant.
Well, it's the same reason that probably even in the military, even in with the German soldiers, they moved to penicillin when penicillin was invented, and they're like, well, we could drink camel shit, and it would actually work, but we can take this pill and it'll mostly work.
Yeah.
But the problem is it only temporarily works. It's just wiping everything out one time. It's not establishing any kind of bacterial colonies that can actually prevent this from happening in the future. It's actually making you more vulnerable. But they're not thinking long-term. Well, I get it again, and I just take more pills, and I get it again, and I just take more pills. And then the long-term cascading effects of using that as the emergency stopgap becomes a problem.
Yeah. It's a short-sighted thinking. That's why I think that, fecal transplants are getting more established now. They're still slow.
Well, it was 2012, you said, somewhere around there, that they actually got approved for C. diff infections.
Right, so not even approved, just enforcement discretion. So it's not a formal approval. It's still under this kind of veil of uncertainty. So it's still, very underrepresented. It's still hard to get. And that's why in the early 2000s, it was interesting how the path had followed. In the early 2000s, people just found it on the internet. It was like a DIY, do-it-yourself fecal transplant. And there was tens of thousands of people doing this every year for C. diff, for ulcerative colitis, Crohn's disease, and so forth. And there was only a handful of doctors doing it. And it was a cure. It was like 94% cure. And then the 6%, you just did it again, and it was a cure. and the FDA wrestled with this. They were required to have an investigational new drug paperwork, which is, if anyone knows, it's just like, it's off the table. It's so much bureaucracy.
And how are you even going to do that? Because it's poop.
It's poop.
Like, it's not going to be standardized.
And they were focused on these long-term risks. Well, what if, the patient gains weight down to, well, these people are dying. They lose this sort of, the recognition of the risk reward in that moment.
Yeah. All right. You're going to gain about a pound when that shit gets enema into your ass, and then you poop, and then you're going to lose it again.
Right.
But I mean, I do understand what they're saying. They had that study on mice where like obese mice were given the gut biomes of like active athletic mice, and they were switched, and then the obese mice became athletic, the athletic mice became obese. So there's probably way more effects, which actually, when you look at it, make it more interesting. So it's kind of like when you're looking for a sperm donor, right? And you're looking for the dad that you want. Like, all right, there's lots of them that can get you pregnant. There's lots of fecal transplants that can cure some of these bacterial imbalances. But you might want to get it from someone who has a lot of other cool attributes too. It's like generally happy, like works out a lot, maybe a good lovemaker. You want like a survey and be like, no,
super poop.
The super poop donors would be rich as fuck. They're just balling on their shit.
There are now. There's donors, super donors that have the perfect feces. And there's feces banks. So it's come a long way. But if we could have. If that research wasn't delayed so long, now we know you can transfer anxious behavior through fecal transplants. So much of these bacteria, have evolved with us for billions of years, and they are producing neurotransmitters. They're almost guiding our behavior.
Sure.
So, now I think there was a study that came out about a month ago on pancreatic cancer. They found a bacterial signature on the tumor. And so they just took long-term pancreatic cancer survivors versus people that didn't do well, and they did the fecal transplant into the mice, and they were able to confer that ability to respond to the treatment. So, to transplant the ability to live longer with pancreatic cancer. So almost every disease state we're finding is somehow influenced by the gut biome. Ketogenic diet, which was used for epilepsy, when you give a mouse, raise it in a germ-free environment, so it's got no microbiome, or give it antibiotics, a mouse that's got epilepsy, put it on a ketogenic diet, it doesn't work. And so we always thought it was, it's beta hydroxybutyrate or some of these, shifting in neurotransmitters, but it's something more even complex than that.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I mean, and the ketogenic diet is something you talk a lot about in the Tripping Over the Truth, and I want to get to that. But just one example, just to go, and we'll talk more about cognitive biases, but just for people to understand how these things people are so resistant, because I think a lot of people might think like, well, if this worked, it would be out there.
Yeah.
Not fucking true.
No.
Not fucking true. Like the guy who, and you tell the story in Tripping Over the Truth, the guy who discovered that H. pylori caused ulcers in the stomach. Everybody's like, fuck off, you quack. Like, you don't know anything. And he's like, yeah, I do. It's really, this is what causes it. And they're like, no, it's not. Wrong. They had their own prevailing theory. And then he was like, all right, well, I'm going to drink H. pylori and you're going to watch what happens to my stomach. Like, that's what it took. And then they were like, oh.
Yeah, he was right.
He was right.
Give him the Nobel Prize.
Yeah, exactly. And did he actually get the Nobel Prize for that?
I think so, yeah.
Well, it was a noble effort that he fucking made. I mean, it's really but what lengths do you have to go to show this, to overcome the prevailing attitudes? And again, like one of the heartbreaking stories is that of the radical mastectomy, but I'm sure I want to get to that as well. But it's just the prevailing way takes a lot of time and research and energy to overturn. It's the same with the psychedelic medicine revolution. Like we were on to this a long time ago through the 60s and the initial studies that we were doing. And now, again, 50 years later, long enough for the people who were academically in power at that time to pass on and to retire or die or move on. Then all of a sudden, wow, we're back. And there's a new paradigm that's actually coming. Hopefully, we get a little bit more cognitively flexible and can speed that process up. Because if we had to take 50 years, we may not have 50 years anymore.
Yeah.
We might not have 50 years to solve these healthcare issues, because the problems are pressing on us hard.
Yeah.
Right now.
Yeah. I don't know how you solve that, other than the take-home message is keep an open mind. Yeah. And it's a lot of it is just institutional. When you look at oncologists' day-to-day job, it's tough. I mean, they're churning through patients. They only have so much time. Patient comes in and what about this? What about curcumin? What about ketogenic diet? And they don't have time to answer all those, number one. And then a lot of them will like to have this modicum of control over the patient, because there's only so many tools in their toolbox. And so they fall back in that line. There's not enough data. And when you look at the ketogenic diet, again, like fecal transplant, you weigh the risk reward. Okay, there's not an FDA approved trial, but there's a hell of a lot of data suggests it could work. And what do I have to lose? You might have a terminal illness and it's a diet. So there's a disconnect between, say, that sort of position of there's not enough data to, the risk reward that the patients are dealing with.
And maybe there isn't enough data, or maybe there is actually adequate data, but like one of the cognitive bias you mentioned is the availability heuristic, which I think applies here. Like you just move based upon the information that you have available.
Right.
So like, what do I know? Well, I know this. I know chemo. I know radiology. I know, these things. So let's go that way.
That's exactly right.
And it's just the way that the brain works.
Yeah. And it's medicine. I tried to make that point in the book. Medicine, it used to be practicable by a doc. He'd come with his little case. There was, a handful of drugs that worked, and he could practice medicine. He knew what he could do and what he couldn't do. Now there's 6,000 drugs. There's 4,000 medical devices and procedures. It's nothing that, these original docs that established this sort of ethos of the doctor as this sovereign of intellectual autonomy. It doesn't look like that anymore. They cannot know it all. They can't know all this data. So this is this transformation that we need to, we need to have a system that helps these doctors, that shows them this non-RCT randomized control trial data when they can apply it. but that's where we're at. And there's pockets of this where you can see it being done. But that's where the whole system needs to go.
Yeah. All right, let's go back to this tripping over the truth, and let's talk about this. For one, chemotherapy is now the established treatment method for all cancer. And I thought there was a really wild story about how chemotherapy was actually discovered and developed. So I was hoping you could share that, and then we'll dive into the rest of things.
Yeah. So it was during World War II. And what was known of cancer at that time was it was just pathological cell division. So that the problem was these cells their brakes had been shut off and they just were dividing. So how do you kill fast dividing cells? And it came sort of by accident. There was a war gas called nitrogen mustard during World War II, and the mustard gas, right? And they'd signed this. The Allies and the Axis had signed this agreement to not use it, but both sides were stockpiling it, thinking the other side was. And so the Bari Harbor in Italy, the Allies were there. They thought the German Air Force was stretched too thin to bomb them. They kind of were, coagulated in there, thinking the Luftwaffe wouldn't come near. They knew they were there and they bombed them, and they bombed the USS Harvey, which was stockpiled all this nitrogen mustard gas. It released it all, and the soldiers got soaked in it, and it went over the town and killed some of the civilians. So that they flew the doctors over. They took back samples from these soldiers that had died, and what they noticed is their lymph cells, their white blood cells, were depleted. So they had this sudden idea, well, here's an agent that could possibly treat leukemias, because there's no way to cut leukemias out. There's no treatment whatsoever for leukemias. So they started a clinical trial, and they just injected war gas into the veins. And you can imagine what that does, to somebody. And those are the same sort of side effects we're associated with chemo today. It's gotten much better, but that was the treatment paradigm, would just try to find this knife's edge of toxicity where the patient doesn't quite die, but you might kill off the majority or some of these cancer cells.
And I think one of the interesting points you make is like this paradigm of the treatment being actually coming from a war gas and being like you're going into war against your body created this whole idea in the zeitgeist of the war on cancer.
Right.
Because why else would you bear such a cost unless it was a war?
Yeah.
Like it's the only way we're storytelling animals, right? Like the only way you can make sense that you're curing yourself is if you're going into war with an agent that you need to kill at all costs. And then you're willing to take the mustard gas and whatever chemotherapy agent equivalent we have. You're like, well, this is war.
And that the vernacular, I think, he put up a good fight.
Yeah.
I was with him in the battle, and that's what's so interesting when you frame cancer differently, as if you look at it as a metabolic disease and you reconfigure this idea of how you treat it. Now it's not a battle. It's about changing sort of the environment. And Tom Seyfried always says you should come out on the other side healthier than when you came in. So, hopefully we can get to that point.
And that was something that, Otto Warburg was onto early, like that idea of what was the fertile ground that allowed this cancer flower to blossom, right? Like what were the conditions that caused it? Like when was his heyday? It was like early 20th century, right?
Yeah, 1924, he made this discovery that cancer cell was just had this metabolic dysregulation. So it just had this voracious appetite for sugar and would not take sugar and then burn it oxidatively in the mitochondria with oxygen. It would just kick out lactic acid. And there's no reason the cancer cell should be doing this. This is something normal cells don't do. So why is a cancer cell doing this? And he died in 1970. He was never really able to answer that question. And that's where, his original theory was brought back to life by Tom Seyfried, who shows there, and this is a center of debate. He claims that the mitochondria are extraordinarily damaged and they just don't work. And that's what Otto Warburg always said. But the crux of it is that even if that's a trigger, the damage to the mitochondria, but you see this consistent shift in the cancer cell towards this metabolic phenotype. And everyone describes cancer as this disease of chaos, but it's doing all these systematic things, right? So cancer is most diseases you can describe by one thing, C. diff, it's an infection.
Sure.
But cancer is it's a narrative. And so I think in my opinion, when you look at everything and tally it up, the reason we haven't made progress is we still describe it as an exclusively genetic disease, when it's better described as a metabolic or epigenetic disease. And there's crossover. Nobody argues that, these mutations aren't important. It's just that they cannot be a comprehensive explanation for the whole disease.
So in this metabolic theory, basically, let's suppose that the mitochondria aren't able to utilize oxygen to produce energy, because the mitochondria's responsibility is to produce the energy for the body to survive. If the mitochondria aren't able to do that through weakening, through damage, or aren't able to do that at the proper rate, then they revert to an alternate method. Yeah. Like this is like the backup generator battery. Well, what's the backup generator? Well, we can ferment glucose. But the moment they switch to the backup generator, they lose communication with the rest of the body. Yeah. Right. And they just go rampantly like, we got to survive. We got to ferment glucose. That's the way that our cells are going to operate, losing coherence with the organism, and which was really made a lot of sense. Like, well, all right. So then instead of the war on this thing, what if you assume that, okay, the cells are smart. They know that they can't get an adequate amount of energy produced through their mitochondria. So they're doing the next intelligent thing as individual organisms whose prerogative it is to survive. Yeah. They're doing the thing they need to do to survive, but they're not aware that they're not in communication with the rest of the organism. So they're actually going to cause their own demise, but they're just thinking about the life of their own cell. Yeah. And they're fermenting glucose and going and reproducing out of control at this point, right? But it's like, at that point, you're like, oh, I hear you, cancer. Like, I've got some problems with my mitochondria. Like, I see what you're doing. Like, you don't need to do that. Let me fix my mitochondria and you're good. Yeah. And it's like, instead of like having this antagonistic approach, be like, okay, cancer, like, I hear you. Like, you're putting up the flag. Got it. Now let's see what we can do to help solve the condition. And it seemed like there was pretty compelling evidence from the strategies that you were discussing in there that doing some things that rehabilitate the mitochondria to a certain degree and improve their health were pretty fucking effective.
Yeah. Yeah. And we're learning more of that. You described that really beautifully, by the way. And that goes back when we look at life on the Earth formed 4.6 billion years ago. Life started about 4 billion and was single-celled organisms for most of the tenure on the planet. Then the one event that allowed us complex organisms to evolve was the mitochondria, a symbiotic relationship where one bacteria ate another and one became the mitochondria. And so that linkage is what signed the contract for cells to operate in a collective. And the way you described it was reverting back to that original prerogative, which is just replicative immortality, divide. They just tear up the contract to live within the collective. That's a great narrative description of what the prime sort of mechanism behind cancer. And so, the way you treat it, restoring mitochondria, restoring that oxidative metabolism that then communicates to come back to the collective. When you fast before chemo, we're now learning, Walter Longo at UCLA, you set up this beautiful differentiate. You get into ketosis quickly, a 72-hour fast. Your healthy cells are made more robust. Your cancer cells are weakened because you drop blood sugar and they're having to shift metabolism. And then you can give lower doses of chemo and they're just sensitized. The cancer cells are sensitized to die. And then you can measure the side effects from the chemo and the healthy cells, and every one of them is diminished. And the objective ones that you can count. So the number of times the patient throws up goes from like 10 a day to 0. So it works, just a fast. Who knew? It's free.
Well, of course, it makes such fucking perfect sense, right? All right, these cells are fermenting glucose to survive. Yeah. All right, so the press strategy, because you talk about the press and pulse, the press strategy is to put pressure on them. Hey, no glucose anymore, buds. Sorry about that. And then you come in with an agent that kills off the weakest. Well, the ones that are the weakest are going to be the ones that are dependent on the thing that you're no longer providing, which is glucose. And so those ones die faster and the patient recovers like quickly because the other healthy cells are still utilizing mitochondria for energy. They can still use oxygen.
Right.
And we're not starving the body of oxygen at all. In fact, Then the next part of the strategy comes in. Okay, instead of starving the body of oxygen, if that's what's actually supporting healthy mitochondria, let's compound the oxygen through hyperbaric treatments.
Yeah. And it makes me wonder, like, so this collective, the cancer cells are living in, and the healthy cells, you're all competing for blood glucose. And I always think of Lance Armstrong. You found out that he was actually riding his bike, his trainer, while he was taking chemo. So he was creating this environment that these healthy cells they're out competing the cancer cells for every nutrient scrap. So I wonder too how much we could, we've always told patients to just lay down, don't be stressed, you'd want to, but I wonder if you created that more of a competition between the healthy cells and the cancer cells, that you'd even get more of a bang for your buck.
Well, it could be just that you're absorbing more glucose too. You could just be closer to a lower blood sugar state, because you go for a walk after a heavy dinner, your blood sugar is going to drop.
Yeah.
Even a walk.
Right.
Like just like simple. These are fat. All of this is like research facts. So that could be it. It's out competing for nutrients, of course, but it also could be just the metabolic effects of starving these cancer cells of their primary source of fuel, which is sugar.
Simple.
Too simple. Too simple for a $1 trillion industry, right?
And that's the problem. Most of these therapies are free. You can't patent them.
Right.
So how, an oncologist who's already too busy.
It's actually literally free of fast. Right. It's the freest thing. For the freest thing you can possibly do. A healthy diet, at least you got to pay for food.
Right.
You can fast. You're good.
That's it. Yeah.
Literally, you got to drink water and breathe air. That's ready, go. Does insurance cover that? I don't know. It costs nothing. You don't need to file the claim. You're good. But then the research has panned out, and that's the other thing too, is like for people who are, because the doctors, there's so much fear, and then there's so much fear and so much hope, and the stakes are so high, it's going to be tough to change even the patient's mind about what to do. But something like when you show the research of, okay, you can still have your chemotherapy, but just if you fast beforehand, look at how much better it works.
Yeah.
That's something that I think like everybody can get on board with.
Yeah.
All right, fasting is a little bit annoying, but guess what? So cancer's way worse. So if this shows that it's going to work, and all you got to do is fast for 3 days before this, and it's going to show these dramatic improvements, like it should be the absolute standard of care. But how many oncology places are actually recommending this?
I bet low single digits, if any. Some are, but it's nowhere near the majority.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's sad. Mm-hmm. And then you have to look at why. Is it the stubbornness of the mind? Is it something where the actual monetary value of these cancer treatments being prolonged, and you talk about all of the unnecessary chemotherapy that's given at the end of life, which I think, was it Munger who talked about it, was like almost nothing short of evil, because it had no benefit.
Yeah.
And it just completely deteriorated the quality of life in people who had no chance of survival, rung up the tab, but at the cost of someone's life and their family and their ability to peacefully live out their last days.
Yeah. And then compared to people who got palliative care, which is just a support group, helping you deal with the fact you could die, and just coming to terms with what's happening. The people who got palliative, this was published in the New England Journal of Medicine, who got palliative care, most of them forwent the end of life, like Hail Mary chemo that other people take, and lived longer, on average 2 months longer. So they had a better ending. It didn't bankrupt the system. And that's another thing that I tried to show in Curable, this human side of medicine that goes to our core DNA we know now, is another just low-hanging fruit that we've really, it's a complex how to address it, but it's there.
Yeah.
And the other thing is that you mentioned, we're really good at screening now. So ultrasounds for prostate cancer, mammograms. So we've gotten really good at detecting early stage cancer. And so what the hell do you do then though? Okay, your prostate looks, your PSA is high. You could have cancer. He says the word, or she. Then the patient panics and wants treatment. What's the treatment look like? Well, it's surgery or chemo. It's caustic. This is a great spot where these metabolic therapies would be perfect, right? The response is proportional to this vague idea you could have cancer. And most of these tumors are benign and won't do anything because we're really good at detecting them early, but the death rates have not budged.
Yeah.
So that's another good spot for these, or these, worrisome pre-cancers that they don't have any good answer on how to treat.
Well, you said that in 2008, 70,000 women were overdiagnosed with breast cancer.
Yeah.
That was a study done. 70,000 women were overdiagnosed.
70,000.
So what does that mean? That means what? Mastectomies? That means chemotherapy? That means all kinds of things.
Yeah. And PSA, if the people or men that get diagnosed with prostate cancer with PSA levels are 47 times more likely to get treatment, so radiation, surgery, or chemo, than they are to have their life extended. It's hard to get your head around that, but yeah. So that's why Munger said, he crosses out the PSA every time his doctor puts it on the list.
Yeah, because he doesn't want him to do anything silly,
Stupid.
he said.
Yeah, I don't want you to do anything stupid.
Say that fact again.
So if you get diagnosed with prostate cancer from a PSA, you're 47 times more likely to get treatment, surgery, radiation, or chemo than you are to have your life extended.
Whoa.
It's a weird fact.
So the treatment doesn't actually extend the life.
Right.
And you're treating, and you're more likely to do it even though it doesn't extend your life.
Right. So the take home is you're treating cancers that are probably not going to have any threat to you. They're benign tumors.
It could make sense because prostates are involved in boners, and men would rather do anything than lose the chance of having a boner.
Which the surgery can make you lose the chance of having a boner.
Oh, man. Well, we really got it wrong then. I mean, come on, people. Get it together. Save your boners. Shit.
That's the new prostate campaign.
That's wild. All right. So you see all this stuff. Briefly, though. So there was obviously the ketogenic diet. There's the hyperbaric oxygen, increasing the oxygen availability in the blood cells. That's the core of the press pulse theory for metabolically treating cancer. You also mentioned some drugs that were interesting investigational drugs like 3BP. And there's another one that I forgot towards the end of the book that actually might have even been better. What are your thoughts on those now? I know some time has passed since the book. Are you still bullish on these kind of metabolic drug treatments?
Yeah, 3BP, the patent holder, Young Ko from Johns Hopkins, she's finally got looks like a deal with a pharmaceutical company to go through trials. And they're going to set up, I think, 3 or 4 different trials. So that's in the works finally. There's all kinds of different repurposed drugs that show this kind of metabolic activity, like metformin is one. Statins, which have an indication for cardiac disease. You look at the data, and they're probably
they're terrible for cardiac disease.
Most people wouldn't recommend them for cardiac, but for cancer, they're extraordinary in the right circumstances.
We'll talk about metformin first because that's operating a different mechanism. Both metformin and the statins are tackling this from 2 different issues.
Right. So so then that's the goal of any type of the therapy is to hit it at every angle you can. So metformin is a weird drug. It lowers blood glucose, but it's doing more than that to the cancer cells. We don't even know all the mechanisms, but it's somehow whatever oxidative phosphorylation they have left, it targets that. And statins, they're what they call pleiotropic molecules. So they hit all different kinds of pathways. They're very anti-inflammatory. Cancer cells really rely on cholesterol synthesis for their membranes. They use it as signaling. So when you cut down that internal manufacture of cholesterol, you're targeting the cancer cell. And when you put these in combination, that's when the data is really interesting. When you look at people that are on statin, metformin together, prescribed for other reasons, their hazard ratios, so their rates of developing cancer drop dramatically, like over 50% in a lot of cases.
It's really interesting because statins were developed because people thought that cholesterol caused heart disease. And then they're like, whoops,
that's not
cholesterol doesn't cause heart disease. It only certain types of cholesterol cause heart disease. And really that cholesterol is formed from actually having too much sugar. So like all of that research came out. So then statins are like, that's kind of like a bad word. When I was reading that, I was like, oh, well, but cancer uses cholesterol in a specifically different way.
Right.
So that's why it's an effective off-label treatment for that. And then the metformin made sense from the just general metabolic theory. I mean, they may have other mechanisms of action too.
Yeah.
But like the general metabolic theory of lowering blood glucose, right?
Exactly.
Like
Yeah.
So both of those are kind of operating in this way. And that's one of the other things you were talking about in Curable is, all right, so you have these drugs that, are around and available, but what's the incentive to do new trials on these new drugs for new things when the patent has already expired?
Yeah.
Right? Because there's nobody who actually benefits from the generics, the generic drug. Actually, who owns the generic drug?
Oh, I think there's various. Yeah.
So all kinds of entities, but there's not enough of a focused interest. Like when you have a patented drug, you got 20 years. There's a focused interest on expanding the market as much as possible. So they'll do the research if they still got the patent.
Yeah.
But something like metformin that's been out, nobody owns the patent. So it'd be like basically like all the milk, which is kind of cool when like milk does an advertisement, like brought to you by milk. And you're like,
who's milk?
That's cool. Like all the milk people got together, like brought to you by beef. And you're like, incredible cooperation, like I really appreciate that cooperation, And I guess that would be the way that it would have to be unless the government was willing to sponsor it or charitable enterprises were willing to sponsor it. It would have to be the generic metformin collective that put together the study to expand the off-label use of metformin, knowing that it's going to get spread around to all of the people providing the generics.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that could be the way. But one way or another, we got to find the avenues, whether it's through charitable enterprise or whether it's through government intervention or whether it's through, like all the cattle farmers getting together and putting a beef commercial on the fucking Super Bowl, like whatever works. We got to find a way to like start expanding the research here.
Yeah. And there's no good answer to that. You're right. It's they call it financial orphans. They're off patent. No one's got an incentive to do that, to do the big trial, to get FDA approval. There's just no incentive. So it'd have to be, that's where you think government would step in and sponsor those kind of trials. Because who benefits from that? We do. The people do. It's like building the interstate highway system. It's a one-time layout, and then it's a 5-cent pill that could affect outcomes for everybody. But these, the government is really entrenched, again, back to these cognitive biases, entrenched in this gene theory. And there's a kind of a pro-innovation bias. And what's next in the pharmaceutical world? Targeted therapies. Now there's CAR T, which is $500,000. They take out your blood cells and re-engineer them and inject them back in. So it's always going towards more expensive, more complex treatments when we have these wonderful treatments that are dirt cheap that just kind of sit there and languish.
Yep. And, all of the different biases that exist in even government spending, right? Like we're like, hey, like US government, like we're not going to get in a land war again. Like we can like shift our spending on some of these fucking bombs and stuff. Like we're good, a couple nuclear submarines and no one's going to fucking land on Canada and come this way. You know what I mean? Like we're good. But still like the spending is, and I'm not saying like cut all military spending. I understand that there's a purpose for the military and it's important to have it, but like the excess that we're spending on some stuff like that is just like, well, how about we study the things that could cure Americans, which are then costing all of this money that we're wasting. I mean, it's like, as you said, it's like one of the biggest expenditures in the whole nation in far as, output. Like, let's spend a little money doing this. And then let's take that money that we save from spending a little money doing this. And then we can maybe spend that on education or I don't know, something cool like that. Like, there's so much opportunity if people could just start to switch their mind a little bit.
The amount of wealth in this country, I mean, we spend more than the next 10 countries combined in military spending. It's insane. There's an art museum in Baltimore, had a spiral staircase it showed like the spending on the railing as you went up. And it was like education's a little like 2 steps and, agriculture. And then you just go wind up the military. And healthcare now is, I think, over $3 trillion in churn in the American economy. So it's about nearing 20%. And it's estimated that 50% of that is waste. So over-treatment, fraud, all in that bucket of waste. If you could chip away at that, say 40%, that's $1.5 trillion that you could spend on schools or just making the citizenry more happy.
Yeah.
Enriching our lives.
And you show examples of this, like in McAllen, Texas. there was this kind of culture of money that developed where everybody was like, send him for an extra CAT scan. Let's cut in here and see what's going on, and let's run these expensive tests. And everybody was just running up this huge tab, and it was actually far higher than the nation's average. And when investigative journalists came in there, they had this huge expose. People went to jail, people figured it out, and McAllen actually dropped down and is now one of the more efficient cities around there. But the same thing can happen from both greed, which is the McAllen story, and then in the Redding story, it was all about fear, right? It was like the fear of heart disease. Yeah. Everybody getting these preventative stents in their heart.
Yeah. It's crazy. The way we incentivize doctors, the fee for service, so they get paid for every treatment and procedure they do. So the obvious incentive is to overtreat, and it just creeps in that direction over time. And you can show this very easily. You put more back surgeons in a county, the number of back surgeries go up, and the outputs don't go up. So you do the math. It just means a lot of people are getting unnecessary surgeries.
Yeah. So
self-insured companies are kind of figuring this out. Walmart's one that if an employee has back pain, they'll fly him to the Mayo Clinic because the doc's there on salary. So they have, incentive. If this patient doesn't need a back surgery, they won't do it.
And that's actually one of the revolutions in healthcare that actually people have took into their own hands. Like, the Berkshire Hathaway founders who probably control one of the biggest conglomerates, including Walmart and all of these other enterprises. They decided, they're like, all right, this is broken. We're gonna go and fix it.
Yeah.
And that's something what's the process of development of that? And that is doctors who are on salary, so there's no fee for service, so they're just there to treat. And it's implementing a lot of these like checklists and best practices that can make like really dramatic improvement. There was some study that there was like a 45% chance of 47% reduction in death rate just by adding a surgical checklist that takes 2 minutes.
2 minutes, 2 minute checklist.
And 47% less people die if you fill out this checklist. Like we don't get like that. This is just a job that it's an important job, but like it's our life. But the doctors may just forget something. They may be thinking about their date later. Like they're human beings and they do this every day. So the tolerance to this is their everyday thing. So having something like a checklist is we can't put them up on this pedestal of like, they're going to be solely focused and maniacally, like maybe they need a checklist like everybody would, like we have a checklist for when we release content. It's not, like everybody has a checklist for when they do, okay, here's the steps to follow for when you do a product launch. Here's the steps to follow for when you do this. Here's the steps to follow for surgery. And guess what? Half the less of the people are going to die.
Yeah. Yeah. I was shocked when you look at every arena of human activity, like you're talking about, sports, the stock market, people have gotten really clever at noticing how the human brain works and trying to find workarounds, checklists, picking players on statistics rather than an antiquated talent scout that's guessing. Mm-hmm. But when you look at medicine, it is lagging so far behind in that, because we always had this culture of the doctor was this sovereign nation of autonomy, and you can't creep in on that autonomy at all by telling him to do a checklist. God, no, you can't do that. So the ones that are really knocking it out of the park, like Intermountain Healthcare in Utah, the system is part of the integration. So the system is helping the doctors. And there's backlash. The doctors don't like it some of the time, but they found ways to work together. And it's the simple shit. It's like checklists, and it's like timing of surgical antibiotics. And it's just watching the doctors and seeing who's doing it the best, giving them accolades, and then they put peer pressure on the other ones. They create this environment of excellence. And Intermountain is about 40% less, 40% more efficient than the national healthcare. So if we could just be as good as them, we cut this by, this huge thing by 40%.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, some of the things that you're talking about, like, okay, so antibiotics are the approved standard standard of care for anybody who's going into surgery because there's germs, especially in a hospital, even if you sterilize it and you're open and you're going to be healing. So, but when is the best time to do it?
Yeah.
That's a good fucking question.
Yeah.
You know, and then finally, like whether it was Intermountain or one of the other, you know, kind of proactive groups, they were like, oh, 2 hours beforehand is the best time.
And it wasn't hard to figure out. You just looked at the record system and did it.
Yeah. And then all of a sudden, all right, now we know, okay, 2 hours before. Yeah. And then there's other like interesting data too about like the, that intravenous aspirin, Kerouac. It sounded like the author was Kerouac or whatever that thing is.
Yeah, that's fascinating. That's again this low-hanging fruit that we just don't capitalize on. So most breast cancers are diagnosed early, like 75% are diagnosed at the primary stage. So when you go in and do surgery, what you see this spike in recurrence about 1 year, and then it goes back down. The question is, why is there that spike? And so when you think about the act of surgery, you're going in there, there's cancer in there, and you're creating this wound, right? You're cutting. And so there's a very, stereotypical response the body does. You have platelets go there to stop the bleeding. They release growth factors to enhance the healing. And these growth factors are what cancer relies on as fuel. So you're basically creating this perfect environment for the remaining cancer cells. And there was an experiment done 50 years ago, these two brothers. They injected exactly 50 cancer cells into the portal vein of rats, and the portal vein goes right to the liver. And they opened up the rats about 3 months later, and there was no liver cancer. They repeated the experiment, but this time they just did an incision across the belly and repeated that every 2 weeks. Then when they opened up the belly or looked at the livers at 3 months, it was just exploded with tumors. So the take home is that this wound process is fueling the cancer. And that's why we see the spike at one year. And so this grad student had an idea, well, is there something you could do to kind of prevent that spike? It's an inflammatory process.
Yeah, so the wound is actually creating a pro-inflammation environment.
Right. So there's once in a while, patients will get this shot of Kerouac, which is just an NSAID. It's a non-steroidal anti-inflammatory. And they do it mostly because it mitigates morphine use after the surgery. And so it's not done all the time. But when you look at those patients who got this shot, there's a 70% reduction in recurrence. That's huge.
That's huge.
That's a $10 shot. And all this, how is there debate about doing that? But there's still debate. It's not standard of care. It's not, and it's a retrospective study. So it's looking back at data, not going forward. But when you look at it, there's no reason to not do that.
Yeah. I mean, the hypothesis of why as a retrospective it wouldn't work would be that you're not randomizing it for the placebo effect. Well, they got a million fucking things going on. They're not going to be like, I got that Kerouac, I'm going to be good. This cancer's not coming back, I'm certain. Like that would be the hypothesis of why you would need the double-blind clinical trial. It's the gold standard, right? It's like not like to think that people are going to be like, oh man, I got that aspirin. Yeah. I'm going to be cancer-free, and fucking signal all their genes and epigenetics to be healthy the rest of their life because they got that one shot and they're like, I'm fucking golden, because it's not like the doctors are telling them like, hey, you're getting this thing. They're like, this will help with your morphine. Not like they're like, we're going to give you this. And you're not going to get cancer ever again. And the patient's like, really? Yeah. Really?
Healed.
I'm healed, which would be a fucking, that would make sense, but that's not what was happening.
That's not what's happening. That's not, you look for those confounders and there's no obvious ones there. And you look at other studies that look back retrospectively, like the British doctors study that first broke that smoking was bad for you. And the prospective study then matched perfectly with the retrospective data. Yeah. So there's kind of a bias towards that data that's unfounded. Yeah.
The next interesting thing that you're talking about, so we're talking about all of these different, kind of cancer treatments for the gut biome, which could affect all kinds of things, including like your mindset, anxiety, depression, all of these different, like so many revolutions in it. But, interestingly, there was another absolutely free treatment for longevity that is really surprising. I actually talked about it a little bit in my book, but like one of the top determining factors of longevity is, drum roll, Travis, please.
Your social life.
Your social life.
Yeah.
your fucking social life.
Yeah.
When you go through, that's a great part of the book, Curable. When you go through all of those centenarians and super centenarians, the people who lived over 100 and lived over 110, and then you go through and they're like, how'd you do it? And one's like 3 Dr. Peppers a day. And the other one's like 12 cigars a day and a nip of whiskey. And the other's like all of these different people. And even that one woman's like, who was like 120 or something.
Yeah, no
she's
fucking
like,
clue.
She's like, I don't know. My life sucked. I was hoping I died way earlier, but God's punishing me, I guess. Like wasn't even positive attitude at that point. It was like, but then you look at a place like Sardinia, which is one of the blue zones they call, where like people are living way longer. And you start to like look at, and there's other statistics too, but you start to look at, all right, well, maybe it's the olive oil, but then why are they higher than all of the rest of Italy? If it's the olive oil, or like you can like look at these things and then you really take a look at it and you find it's because they're built their homes right on top of each other and everybody's just hanging out all the time.
Yeah. It's, I guess it was never appreciated how corrosive loneliness is. And now now it's studyable, it's social genomics. So when you look at somebody who reports they're lonely versus somebody who reports they're, happy and have a good social life, you look at their 23,000 genes, 209 of them are expressed differently. And then you look at those genes and what's going on. And the ones that are upregulated are the ones involved in the initial inflammatory response. So these people have this kind of low-grade inflammation, which is associated with early death, with cardiovascular disease, cancer, everything. And the ones that are turned down are the steering response of the immune system. So the ability to fight off infections, viruses and everything. So their immune systems are compromised just by feeling lonely. So there's this underappreciated kind of looping system from our perception to our epigenetics and our true, the way our bodies are acting.
Yeah.
Which intuitively, I guess most people knew this, you probably knew this, but now we just see, you can map it out.
Well, you see the stats and then that field of social genomics. And the interesting thing is, so there's not like an absolute or objective amount of loneliness. Like you got to spend this amount of time with a person. Like it's your perceived loneliness, which then goes into the interesting research of like your remembering self versus your experiencing self, which I want to talk about. But it's your perceived loneliness that contributes to a 50% increase in early death, right? Yeah. So you could be around a lot of people, but if you still perceive yourself as lonely for whatever reason, then you're going to fall in that category. You could be out in nature and be like fucking Rumi and be like, the trees are my friends. Yeah. And like not be lonely at all, even though you're hardly ever seeing every time, somebody comes in once a week and like you give them a hug and have some tea with them. And that's good for you. Right. That's good for your constitution. That person wouldn't report being lonely. Well, as long as they don't report being lonely, they're not perceiving themselves as lonely. They're not triggering those epigenetic triggers, which is like the volume knobs on our gene expression. Yeah. It's a great way that you put it in the book. They're not triggering that, so they're not contributing to these diminishment of life expectancy.
Yeah, I guess it's a need. So there's introverts that just don't need to be around that many people to not feel lonely. And then there's extroverts or just people that can be in a crowded room and feel lonely. So it's an intrinsic need. And I thought it was interesting that the person, that I talked about in the book that lived the longest, Jeanne Clement from France, she lived to be 122. She was extraordinarily active. She had a wonderful life. She never had to work. Her husband was rich, very active, but she just didn't have a need to be around. She never professed ever being lonely. And when she was 120, she said, she told a reporter, I think of my life, I'm never bored. And people who knew her would always say she just kind of had this way about her. She just never really got concerned, or she just didn't handle stress really well. So I guess
she smoked cigarettes.
Yeah, she smoked.
Even in her retirement home that she went to at 110. Yeah. She's like, fuck it, I'm going. Yeah. And she makes friends with a nurse and smokes cigarettes with her after every meal.
In moderation, she started when she was like 20 and smoked till she was 117. It was like 1 or 2 after dinner every night. And some port wine and a dessert. But it was moderation, she was active. Sure. So I get, the take home to me was that we get so spun up in what am I doing it right? Where's my vitamin D level? Am I exercising enough?
I ate this fucking cracker today. I know it had gluten in it.
Yeah,
It said gluten-free, but I know there was iodine in there. I'm going to die.
So, but those variables are not really what matters. Obviously in excess they do, but to our health and longevity, it's not there.
Yeah. It's, I think you summed it up. It says, don't worry so much. Have an occasional dessert or a drink if you want. Be active, play, be moderate. Engage with the world and the people around you. Not only will you live longer, you'll live better.
Yeah.
Sums it up.
Yeah, the science takes you to a beautiful way to live your life.
Yeah.
And it's interesting because you can tell somebody to eat this, have your vitamin D level here, but you can't tell somebody how to not be lonely. So you enter this, this world where health becomes kind of artistic or a pursuit.
And also like social engineering starts to become interesting. Like what one interesting thing that you were pointing out is that actually loneliness is increasing with each new generation.
Yeah.
Perceived loneliness is increasing. Potentially this is related to the proliferation of social media and the isolation that we feel based upon that. Who knows? But also like depression, suicide rates, a lot of these different things that come from comparing ourselves to other, and maybe actually instead of getting together and meeting up, we're just texting everybody all the time, which is creating this sense of loneliness. The body doesn't fully recognize that as community.
Yeah.
So like re-engineering and re-understanding this idea of community and how you gather and what reasons you gather for, and like, like that's a really interesting thing that's going to have a dramatic impact. Like there's a billion biohacking summits, all over the nation and world. But like, how about like social, the community building summits? Like, hey, how do we hang out more with each other?
Yeah.
Like how can we form bonds with people and how can we re-engineer like the way we live and how we, cultivate these, environments where we aren't lonely?
Yeah. And I think I put a quote in there from Thomas Jefferson, who said that the duty of government is the happiness of the citizenry. In our government, they don't consider happiness of the citizenry, but the UK, they actually consider that as a metric for how they operate. And that really should be, the way it should be a consideration. How do you design a society you say utopia, but just to be better?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that's a fucked up question though, because as Kahneman, one of the researchers who you talk about, who studied happiness for 3 decades, he was trying to figure out what makes somebody happy. And then finally he just kind of threw his hands up and was like, I don't know. People are people, like, leave me alone. That's what it seemed like he kind of got to the conclusion, because happiness is such an ephemeral thing. Yeah. And what he did is he described the difference between the experiencing self, I am happy right now, versus the remembering self, which recalls your personal history and your life data and decides whether you are happy based on certain things that stick out in your story.
Yeah.
It's like the people you had a study in there of the people who won the Oscar lived way longer than the actors of the same, variety who didn't win an Oscar. Like, why is that?
Yeah.
Why is winning the Oscar getting the nod from, well, perhaps their remembering self remembered their life as happier. Like, I won an Oscar.
Yeah.
I was like, I really did it.
Yeah. And Kahneman had a clear, when you read his work on happiness, he had a clear, well, I shouldn't say bias, but he really thought that the experiencing self was more important. So, and when you,
which makes sense, because am I happy right now?
Right now, yeah,
sure,
yeah,
that seems to be valuable.
Right, and that's he did. It's a really interesting way to look at it. So he divides it up into experiencing self and the remembering self. And most of the data is on when you ask somebody, "Are you happy?" It automatically engages the remembering self. You think of your life, and so you're really reporting on your life narrative. But if you ask somebody in this very moment, "Are you happy?" Now you're engaging the experiencing self. So he did studies where they had timers and beepers, and you'd ask some people throughout the day, "Are you happy in this moment?" to get a reflection of what the experiencing self is going through. What he shows is the remembering self. So like when you reel back through your life, what do you see? Do you see regret, or do you see success? That turns out to be the one that's in charge. So when you decide what you're going to do tomorrow, where you're going to go on vacation, you're really engaging the remembering self. And the remembering self is mostly motivated by bullshit. So So material things, right?
Yeah.
Your social media feed when you're on vacation instead of just being there in the moment. But then, and that seems very kind of intuitive and obvious, but then you look at that Oscar study, which shows that there's actually impact to people that are accepted, the remembering self, right? This is acceptance from the beehive somehow penetrates you and confers health. So they're not, they're intertwined, but you can look at them as separate, but there's obviously they're weaved together in some weird way.
It's kind of like that perceived loneliness thing, right? Like if you perceive yourself as, whether you perceive yourself as happy, whether you're happy or not, is actually one of the biggest contributors to this thing, and that the remembering self, whether you remember yourself as happy or whether that actually matters, because that's what's signaling your genes constantly. That's what's actually that's what is the epigenetic trigger. It's that state of, because and it makes sense in a way, because these moments are fleeting. But what's the constant pressure?
Right.
The constant pressure on your epigenetic triggers is what you remember about your life.
Right.
Am I always in stress? Am I always in trouble? Am I always sad? Am I always lonely? Am I always this? That's kind of like the constant state that you're signaling in the background. Whereas actually the immediate flowy state, whatever that is, maybe isn't persistent enough to actually cause as much impact unless it actually confers to your remembering self state.
Yeah.
And then you can but the remembering self, like you said, is ineffective. It's a narrative based thing that remembers beginnings, significant moments, and ends of stories. And you have interesting water temperature studies where the water heats up at the very end of people immersing their hands in cold water. And even though they're in there longer, they're like, that was nice.
Yeah.
It's
that one was interesting, wasn't it?
Right. Because it's the end of the story was what
is more important.
Was more important than actually the amount of pain that they actually felt.
Yeah. Yeah. We're fucked up.
We're fucked up. We're fucked up. And it's I think the key to actually any time that anyone realizes the state that we're in is just being able to observe without judgment and be like, okay, yeah, cool. We're all fucked up. Yeah. And that's okay. Now let's look at this. Let's observe it. I mean, I think that's what, that's what Munger was doing, really. That's what they were doing when they were taking a look at this. They're like, wow, all right, we're fucked up. And that excites me. How are we fucked up? Let's look at this and let's see, what are the things that are causing the problems and fix those first. Yeah. What's the thing that's making things worse rather than what can we do to make it better? All right, well, let's look at what's making it worse. Well, all of these cognitive biases, all these things, that's making it worse.
Yeah.
That's a good place to start.
Yeah. And I think with your health, that kind of inverse rule of problem solving is important. We always think, well, I don't feel good. What should I add in? What can I take?
Right.
It should be what can I take away that's causing that? It's a good rule, I think, to live by, just to solve problems. Is looking at them from that kind of underbelly direction.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, I can't encourage people more to read these books. I mean, all these things that we talked about, the studies, you have all the studies, all the descriptions, available in here for people who are the data heads and looking to get in. And the things that you'll find are just absolutely shocking. I mean, I have a list of 27 things here and we've gotten through half of them, but little things that I'll never forget, 7,000 people die every year from sloppy physician handwriting. 7,000 people. Fuck. What if that's your grandma or your mom or and it's they use an iPad.
Yeah.
For real, you can fix 7,000 lives. I saw something posted from Tim Kennedy the other day. 3,000 people died in 9/11. 8,000 people died in the war on terror on our side as soldiers. Okay, 7,000 people a year are dying. Look how much of a fucking
disproportionate. Yeah.
That was such a big deal. Yeah, granted it was fucking horrible. But 7,000 people a year are dying from sloppy handwriting. We can type. That's all you need to do is type and you fix that problem. 200,000 Americans die because of some other kind of medical error. So like, what are the efficiencies there you can get? And all the money that's being wasted, like so many of these different things that you start to look at and you're like, man, come on. Like we can do better. We really can.
Yeah. So you got to end on a positive note, right?
You got to end on a positive note. And you did a beautiful job of that.
Yeah. And you know, when I was writing that book, everything I didn't touch on what do we do? Single payer, how do we solve it? And everything when I was writing it led towards a single payer. It just seems like that makes the most sense. And you can eliminate a ton of waste by going single payer, you know, just like that.
What is single payer?
So a single payer system, like a national healthcare system, like the NHS in England or Canada has, where everybody's insured and the government pays. Mm-hmm. And you know that's part of the debate right now. Most of the Democrats are for single payer, and it does make sense, you know. But then when you look around in the U.S., especially, there's these pockets of incredible innovation. So these like boutique healthcare companies are popping up, like Virta Health. They do a ketogenic diet for type 2 diabetes. It's value-based, so that the employer or the payer only pays if they get results. And there's literally hundreds of these kind of companies cropping up. Intermountain Health is just I'd rather go there so much more than the UK or the Canada. So there's these huge pockets of innovation in the US. Now, how do we kind of merge those two? How do we take care of everybody? But when you go to a single payer, you homogenize everything and you lose those wonderful vicissitudes that capitalism thrives on. Mm. You know, you can't really bake innovation in there too well.
Yeah.
So how do you that's a huge problem. And I don't know the answer to that, but that's the conundrum we're at. How do we solve this thing?
Yeah, it's interesting because you get to that, which would be a gigantic bureaucratic machine, and then innovation is going to come really slow.
Yeah.
But it solves a lot of problems carte blanche right off the bat. Yep. Like all the fee for service issues, all of the discrepancies in medical care across the board. But like you said, then it maybe prevents the innovation that could really radically transform healthcare and like lead the example for the whole rest of the world. So, that's a question that, probably somebody with some more Moneyball kind of answers than us with all our cognitive biases can actually.
Well, that's what I'm hoping. The Berkshire, they got Atul Gawande as a CEO, and he's a brilliant, brilliant guy. Yeah. So that's one to look at to see what they do.
Yeah.
Maybe they'll get it right. Maybe they'll do it.
Well, that's the thing, that when problems become bad enough, solutions tend to arise. And that's unfortunately one of the ways that people move into action is at the point where things are really so shitty that we have to change. And maybe that's the silver lining of the system that we've created, is like, oh yeah, we made it so fucked that now we're going to be forced to innovate because we can't bear the cost anymore at scale. The more people we have, the more people that are getting sick. The money alone isn't going to be there. The work efficiency isn't going to be there. We're going to rot from the inside out, so to speak, as a nation, unless we fix this healthcare crisis that we have, which may be the thing that's causing the innovations, like with the Berkshire Group. Yeah, they'll be like, okay, got it. Yeah, like we got to come up with some different solutions, and it seems like that's happening, and that's the encouraging. Yeah, that's the encouraging factor.
Yeah. I think 1 in 5 people now have medical debt. Yeah. It's bankrupting the country. So yeah, you're right. It's unfortunate that we as a species have to wait till something's beating us in the face before we react. Yeah. Well, fast every once in a while. Put someone else's poop in your butt. Think outside the box a little bit. And there's so much to look forward to in what we have going on, but not be blinded by the negatives of what we see as well. So I think it's also, if we have that kind of better outlook, we're probably going to live longer ourselves. So we'll be able to help more rather than if we look at the bleak, pessimistic side of things. That was another thing. Like there's that study done on people who wrote their own autobiographies, and the people in the lowest quartile of those who said were like the least happy, they died 10 years earlier than everybody else. Right. So, that understanding, like the scientific basis for putting yourself in a state of gratitude, looking back like a Stoic would upon their life and saying, oh, thank you for my challenges and thank you for these things. Like, so that you look at all of these things that have
been challenging in your life and all of the conditions that were hard and all of the stuff, and you alchemize those into something that you're grateful for. Like, that's not just for funsies. Like, that's gonna mean you're gonna live longer if you're able to do that. You know, if you can say like, thanks for my pain and thanks for my challenges and thanks for all the shit that I've gone through. You know, like, I really appreciate that because it's made me stronger. And you have that attitude and you look back at your life and you go, man, my life was fucking perfect because every challenge came and allowed me the opportunity to get stronger. And we look at the nation being, man, our nation went the perfect way because it got everything so fucked up that we had to fix it and we innovated and we have that outlook on life. Well, at the very least, we're going to be better off.
Right.
You know, so that seems to be the way to go. Thank you so much for all your work and all your research and putting this out there. And, you know, just, keep going. And any help that I can provide or anything else, you know, I'm so behind this cause. You know, it's so important and affects all of us. You know, we all know people who have, you know, been in the system and suffered the consequences of the system. And some people have had great outcomes and successes as well. It's not all bad. You know, doctors are not mean and, you know, mostly greedy out to get people, and the system is not conspiring against. It's just, you read this, you understand it's just human nature, you know, and people are most likely doing their best, you know? And that's another thing to remember too. There may not be any villain here other than just human nature itself.
Just understand it.
Yeah. Just understand it. Well, thanks so much. The book is Curable. It is out. When is it out?
October 3rd.
October 3rd. So I think when this podcast publishes, the book will be available. It's going to be Amazon, Audible.
Amazon, and I'm not sure which bookstores I got it in, but most of the major ones,
Cool.
Yep.
And then we have a talk tonight, so we'll have that out as well.
Yeah, right on.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Travis.
Hey, man,
Appreciate
thank
it.
you.
Thanks, everybody. Peace. Thanks for tuning into this podcast with Travis Kristofferson and I. And please, if you know anybody who's affected by any of these conditions, please share the podcast. The information is there. The research is there. And one of those things that we can use both preventatively and as a treatment is ketosis, and getting the body to utilize ketones as an energy and fuel source and to help enhance and recover mitochondrial function. And one of the ways that we can do that as kind of a hack is to use exogenous ketones. And that's adding extra ketones into the body to prime that system and allow you to reap the benefits of ketone energy, even if you're still having carbohydrates, like a lot of us. So that's why we came out with the Total Keto Daily from Onnit. It has the exogenous ketones in there. It has everything else to complement them and a great flavor. It's something that I'm drinking every single day because I love the feeling, whether I'm in actual nutritional ketosis through a restricted ketogenic diet, or I just want to have some of the benefits of the ketones to keep my brain sharp. I mean, that's really where I notice it, is energy and then cognitive ability. That's where I personally just really notice it the most. So I love being in a state of ketosis. And you can actually measure it with one of those acetone meters, one of those breath pens, and it makes a difference when you take exogenous ketones. You'll actually be utilizing ketones as an energy fuel. And one of the best ways to do that is with these ketone salts, especially something as delicious as the Total Keto Daily. So go to onnit.com/Aubrey, save 10% on Total Keto Daily, and just get a feel for it, you know, get warmed up, get a feeling for what it feels like to be in ketosis. I think you guys are going to dig it. Thanks so much. Onnit.com/Aubrey. And once again, please share this podcast with anybody who might benefit from it.